Hey everyone, Announcer of Games here, and I was finally able to play in a 40k tournament! Now, unlike someone who is way more bricked than I am, who could go to the Las Vegas Open, my dumbass is stuck in the middle of goddamn nowhere, and my only options are my local tournaments or carpooling to an event that is 4 to 6 hours away. And as you know, we smaller content creators can totally afford to fuck around for a weekend, right? I'm very poor. However, even though a local tournament isn't the same as an LVO-sized event, it can still have amazing, stupid, and awesome games that can happen within them. Now, my local tournament sadly only had a maximum of 12 people allowed. This is due to a couple of key factors such as store space, the amount of tables available, and the fact that the Pokemon TCG was having a grand championship on the same weekend. Which, you know what? Good for them. The group had at least 30 players and they had a great time and their organizer was so nice. And hey, if it meant that people were hanging out together, that's fine. Now, originally, I wasn't able to take part in this tournament because, like a dumbass, I didn't call ahead. Man, it's like making content 24/7 to appease algorithms a total bitch and eats up all of your time. So, when I went to pay for my entry fee, the TO informed me of the bad news. However, he also said that he would like me to still show up day of to help if they needed it, as well as be there in case some people drop for one reason or another. So, of course, I accepted. I need to get out of the Chaos Torture Chamber every once in a while and socialize. I'm only human. So, day comes. I have my army, me and my brother go down, and we get to meet the other players, seeing how the tables were built, and just helping it fast. Perfectly reserved that I most likely won't get to play. Until the TO says 2 of the players are no-shows. Boys, it's fucking on.
I have a PhD in dueling! That takes 9 years in duel school, you know!
Now, a quick thing about 40k tournaments. They're not like the anime tournament arcs with bracket systems where only the winner moves up. Instead, you and your opponent compete for victory points, which you score by either completing the main mission objective or secondary objectives. You can either choose 2 secondaries to use permanently, that you can score multiple times over the course of a game, or draw 2 randomly each round for the whole game at the cost of only being able to score each one of them once. Once you and your opponent complete your game, the highest score wins, and the winner will go on to face someone else who won their game, while the loser will go on to fight someone else who lost their game. At the end, those who usually go with 0 losses will be the winner. But if there is a tie, the amount of points those players scored over the course of the tournament is what determines the tiebreak.
I don't know where I am, but I have the sudden urge to not have sex.
The tournament is played with 2,000 points, and I chose to play my 1,000 Suns, my favorite army that gives those with dust allergies pause. 1,000 Suns are one of the better armies out there, having fairly decent board control and abilities. An army that, on its surface, looks very one-note, but pulling back that layer, you'll find textbooks of complexity. The 1,000 Suns army ability is Cabal of Sorcerers, where each one of my sorcerers generates what we call Cabal points. A regular aspiring sorcerer generates 1 Cabal point, while Magnus generates 4 Cabal points. During each round at the end of my command phase, I add the points from each sorcerer that is on the table into a pool that I can use for psychic shenanigans during the battle round. These abilities can range from rerolling a single save to shooting lightning out of my ass. As well, the 1,000 Suns only have 1 detachment right now. Think of it as an additional ability that your army gets. During the command phase, I can give all my psychic attacks and weapons the ability to auto-wound on hit rolls of 6s, create additional hit rolls on hit rolls of 6s, or do damage that can't be saved normally on wound rolls of 6s, making 1,000 Suns a pretty scary force if you know how to set up everything to maximize your Cabal points and know what is the right ability to give your army at what time. The army I took to the tournament was led by Magnus the Red, the son that can somehow fuck up doing nothing. The downside of taking Magnus is that he has to be your warlord, which makes him a huge target that opponents will dedicate lots of firepower to kill, giving them a lot of points if they take Assassinate and bring it down for secondary objectives. However, his abilities of reducing damage, adding 1 to hit and wound for friendly psychic attacks within 6 inches, and being a fucking monster in melee combat far outweigh those downsides. I also took Arimana Disc of Tzeentch because that extra wound helps, and he lets me use a Cabal ability for free once per game. as well as an Infernal Master to let me change a die roll that this little bugger makes to a 6 and give additional hits on 6s, which make regular Rupert Marines pump out way more shots than normal. And a Sorcerer in Terminator armor to give the unit he joins auto wounds on hit rolls of 6s and reroll hit rolls of 1 against an enemy unit I declare in my shooting. I then took 2 units of Rupert Marines with Soul Reaper cannons for dealing with chaff, and Icon of Flame to give them extra AP on wound rolls of 6. And I took 2 10-man bricks of Rupert Terminators with 2 Hellfire Missile Racks for some anti-armor shenanigans. But these guys are where the heart of my army is. The Rupert Terminator's ability is that they have a Sorcerer in their unit, which they always do due to their squad leader being one. If an enemy's weapon strength is higher than the Terminator's toughness, my opponent's attacks take a hard -1 to wound them, meaning that my Terminators can never be wounded on a roll of 2. And I have 20 of these annoying bastards on the table, and that's not all. The stratagem Ensorcelled Infusion, at a cost of 1 command point, not only increases the strength of bolters in a unit I choose to strength 5, but it makes their bolters become psychic weapons, which means that they benefit from the detachment rules, which means I can have devastating or auto wounds on 6s. But we aren't done! If I spend another command point on Devastating Sorcery, I can reroll all of my Terminator's hit rolls and wound rolls, or even Magnus's for that matter. Do you feel it now, Mr. Krabs? My list has a lot of psychic teeth, and though I'm only 5 units on the table, they are beefy and extremely dangerous. As well, it's my preferred way to play, because fuck Zangors, who the hell needs them? Vortex Beasts? Fuck them! The might of the 1,000 Suns comes from my dusty boys and the man with nipples on his head. So now that my army's ready, let's get into the games. Round 1 was against Necrons, and ooh boy, this list was meant to be a pain in my ass! I was going up against the Silent King, the guy who rules over all the Necrons, and the reason why I have to bite their shiny metal asses. The Nightbringer, which is every metal band's album cover personified, a goddamn Tesseract Vault, 2 Destroyers, some Flayed Ones, a Hexmark Destroyer, 2 Doomsday Arcs, a team of Deathmarks, a Triarch Stalker, and the bane of my fucking existence, a goddamn Tomb Spider! This list was pretty beefy. And even worse, my opponent chose the Hyperphase detachment, which means at the end of my turn, they can pick up to 3 units and teleport them anywhere on the board, following regular Deep Strike rules. Not only that, but he has tons of abilities to ignore negative modifiers to his stats thanks to the Silent King. His whole army is able to soak up tons of damage, and that goddamn Tomb Spider gives him feel no pain saves against my psychic attacks. And he also has a lot of artillery, meaning that he can hang back and shoot me confidently while I have very little to respond with. I also got scared that Magnus wouldn't survive a round of shooting from all that, so I placed him in reserve with my Terminators. As well, due to the amount of large things he was bringing, I chose Assassinate and Bring It Down for my secondaries. The first turn began, and it was rough. Ahriman and his unit of Rubrics took a full bombardment from the Tesseract Vault, but on my turn, my Infernal Master and his squad were able to wipe out his Flayed Ones, who he had infiltrated deep into my line to secure the objective within it. Turn 2 came around, and although Ahriman's bodyguard unit was fully destroyed, leaving the guy alone on my own objective, it was a lot more hopeful for me. Magnus and all my Terminators came down from reserves, but problems began to surface as my opponent had set up his army so I couldn't get in his back line, meaning that Magnus and my Terminators were staring down the barrel of a goddamn Death Star laser. Though luckily I was able to kill one of the Doomsday Arcs, everyone else failed to do their damn jobs. My Terminators failed to get into melee combat, and although Magnus was able to charge the Tesseract Vault, the Nightbringer took personal offense to that and proceeded to hand Magnus his shit. Now, to most people, losing Magnus and seeing the Necrons recover from some of the damage I did would usually call that game. But I still had my Terminators, who were proving to be way more annoying to kill than my opponent thought they would be. Not only did they take bombardments from his vault, the Silent King, and all his other heavy hitters, but my big beefy boys were distracting him from completing objectives. So I pushed up, and my Terminators not only toughed out the worst of the damage, but they were dealing some pretty hefty damage back. However, The game came down to my Terminators fighting both the Silent King and Nightbringer. As well, he had his snipers kill Ahriman and take my home objective, but I was able to get my Infernal Master back to contest it against the snipers. But again, it came down to if I could kill the Silent King. Going into Psychic Phase and shooting, my Sorcerer and Terminator armor opened up on him with a Doom Bolt. We spiked that 6 on the die, dealing D3 plus 6 mortal wounds, and we killed him. But to my shock and surprise, the Silent King has deadly demise, meaning that when he dies, he has the potential to explode. And my opponent rolls a 6, causing the Silent King to explode. He kills the last bit of my Sorcerer's Terminator bodyguards, but he also kills his own Hexmark, critically injures the Nightbringer, and kills his own Tombsfighter, which then allows my other Terminator unit to kill the Nightbringer, who also explodes, and his explosion kills the 5 snipers contesting my home objective. With this chain of explosions and kills, as well as being the final turn of the game, I scored 44 points to my opponent's 33. A very tough and hard game all the way through. That damn Tombspider let a lot of his army survive some of the worst punishment I could dish out, and really the only reason I won was because of those 2 explosions. If that didn't happen, I would have lost. But I won, and I went on to round 2. Round 2 was against the Space Wolves, the Thousand Suns arch rivals, and the goddamn furry convention that burned the Thousand Suns homeworld of Prospero to the ground. Even worse, this guy was packing the Lightning Assault Detachment, which allows his Space Wolves to charge even if they advanced or fell back. His list contained Bjorn the Fell-Handed, Logan Grimnar, Arjak Rockfist, several Wolfguard battle leaders, with 2 of them on Thunderwolves and 1 walking, 2 units on Thunderwolf Cavalry, 2 Incursor Squads, a Fenrisian Wolf Pack, Wolfguard Terminators, and goddamn Knight Castellan! But I had my dignity on the line as a Thousand Suns player, so I could not back down. I kept my Terminators in Deep Strike, but I deployed Magnus properly this time. As well, thanks to the tournament rules, buildings can block line of sight, meaning that as long as I kept Magnus out of sight of that Knight Castellan, I wouldn't have to worry about it that much. As well, for my secondaries, I chose Assassinate again, as he had a ton of hero units on the board, and Engage on all fronts, which scores 2 to 6 points per turn if I have units in 3 or 4 table quarters of the board. The game begins with me going first, and Magnus quickly zooms up the field, drops some spells, does some damage to Bjorn and an Incursor squad, and then I move Magnus again by using some of my Cabal points to behind a building so that the Knight Castellan couldn't respond. Then it was the Space Wolf's turn, and he directed all of his Thunderwolves to hunt down Magnus, and since he could advance and charge, yeah, Magnus was in for it. However, due to Magnus being a beefy boy and his damage-reducing abilities, he was only able to get 5 wounds into Magnus, and Magnus responded by killing everything that the Space Wolves loved, by hacking away with extra attacks on 6s and devastating wounds, which Magnus gets naturally in melee combat. On my next turn, Magnus cleared out the first Thunderwolf unit, and my Infernal Master and his unit were able to secure an objective. I brought my Terminators in, and they started tearing into everything this man loves. But on his turn, Bjorn charged my Infernal Master's unit and wiped them out, while St. Nicholas, the old fuck, charges Magnus. And after everything is said and done, on the second turn, Magnus is on 3 wounds, and my opponent is leading in points massively. However, turn 3 is where my army says, nah, we ain't playing like that. And we start going the fuck off. Magnus murders Logan and the rest of his Thunderwolves. My Terminators proceed to not only murder Bjorn the Fell-Handed, but also killed Arjak's entire retinue and secured an objective, while my second Terminator unit sprays down the Fenrisian Wolf Squad in the back and is joined by Magnus. In this turn alone, I was able to tie it up, but it was still a knife's edge. However, one of my opponent's turns, his army just wasn't able to hurt Magnus anymore, and my Terminators proved to be way too tough for the Knight Castellan to deal with normally. Turn 4, Magnus gives the Terminators in the backline 2+ movement, which lets them get to my opponent's objective in his deployment zone. Using Arimon's free Cabal ability to let me use Ensorrel Infusion for free, I was able to melt the last of the Space Wolves and instantly murder the Knight Castellan in shooting. By turn 5, I tabled the Space Wolves and was able to score the max of 100 points at the end of the game. This game was a brutal back and forth, and my opponent Alex was a great sport about it. Learned a lot about fighting Space Wolves against him, and genuinely it was an awesome time. We both had a lot of fun. And although it sucks I wasn't allowed to take pictures of the game due to privacy reasons and store rules to show you all, it was great nonetheless. But I was 2 wins in, and it was heading to the final game of the day. Oh boy, who was I fighting next? Chaos Knights. Ah, fuck. Now, my army is fairly good at dealing with most problems, but the only real source of anti-armor was either Magnus or the missile racks on my Terminators. Chaos Knights are also a major obstacle when it comes to my army because they're based around being really big and scary and battle-shocking units, and if any of my units gets battle-shocked, well, say goodbye to all the abilities that are keeping my army stable. My opponent's army had 2 War Dog Marauders, 3 War Dog Brigands, a Knight Rampager, a Knight Desecrator, who was his warlord, and a Knight Abominant, the big mean Psychic Knight. This list is basically the list that any Chaos Knight player who wants to win will bring, with lots of rerolls, lots of fear effects, and lots of just abusing my poor asshole. But I took a deep breath, picked Assassinate and Bring It Down again for secondaries, and we started the game.
I'm gonna tell him.
Don't you dare.
I got the first turn, and Magnus did what he does best. Jump out, hurt something with his psychic attacks, then yo-yo back to safety. He managed to hurt a War Dog Brigand pretty thoroughly, and with line of sight blocking terrain, my opponent wasn't really able to respond aside from being able to shoot my Infernal Master unit with his Abominant, which did surprisingly nothing. Turn 2 is basically where Tzeentch looked upon our game and decided that he was done giving me my toughest battles, and decided that Chaos Knights deserved a good Doom Bolt to the ass. My Terminators came in, and not only did I murder a War Dog Brigand in his deployment zone, but my Terminator unit, led by a Sorcerer and Terminator Armor, in 1 turn on their own, murdered the Knight Abominant. This is where my opponent went, you know, I think that's the game. Losing 3 knights in 1 turn is like watching your house and car explode, with the explosion also taking out your favorite restaurant. Let's put it this way. By turn 3, I tabled him completely. And genuinely, I have zero fucking clue what happened. Like, Magnus only took damage from tank shocks, and from the Knight Desecrator exploding on him. My opponent failed to kill any of my units, and I was expecting to be absolutely ass-blasted. But instead, I was the ass-blaster. However, I did not score a total of 100 points. Because of a misunderstanding, I thought that there were 3 characters on the board, with each big knight being a character. I was wrong. Only the Knight Desecrator and Abominant were characters, and the Rampager was just some guy named fucking Steve. Fuck you, Steve! In total, it was 98 to 10. Still an amazing showing on my part. My opponent was also a super cool dude, and this group wants me to go to a tournament they are running in a couple of months, and due to that being not too far away from me, I might just go to it. But it was the end, and I was sitting pretty at 242 points and 3 wins. A crazy damn good day. Once all the games were done, we had 2 people who won all 3 of their games. Me and a Custodes player named Taylor, who beat me out by... Fuck! Nah, I wasn't mad. It was an amazing time, and second place by 2 points? That's incredible. Genuinely, locals may not be these big, epic events like LVO or Adapticon, but they can still be incredible places to learn the deeper mechanics of 40k and still have fun and interesting games of 40k. This was a much-needed break from all the stresses of life, and all the players were super nice and amazing to play with. As well, I got this cool beer stein as a trophy. Sure, my wife is using it for iced tea, but hey, I also got a Sister's Warsuit unit out of it too. So, win-win. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more of these kinds of videos in the future. As well, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. And join the Patreon if you want to see my videos early. It helps keep the lights on and keeps me and my family fed. And I'll see you all next time.